It was supposed to be a milestone celebration. Nothing extraordinary, just another birthday surrounded by friends and the warmth of a marriage I thought was rock solid. But sometimes life delivers a message so cruel that it leaves you shattered. That was the day my phone lit up with photos that collapsed 15 years of trust into ruins. The images of my husband Daniel with another woman weren't just evidence of betrayal. They were carefully timed to destroy what should have been a day of joy. What his mistress Vanessa didn't realize when she pressed send was that she hadn't broken me. She'd awakened something far more dangerous than heartbreak. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I still remember every detail of that morning. The soft autumn light filtering through, our bedroom curtains, the smell of coffee brewing downstairs, Daniel's birthday gesture before heading to work. He'd kissed me sweetly before leaving, promising a special dinner that evening. 40 is a big one, Claire, he'd said with that smile that still made my heart flutter after all these years. I've got something planned you'll never forget. He was right about one thing. It was unforgettable, just not in the way either of us had imagined. I spent the morning responding to birthday messages, feeling that particular warmth that comes from being remembered. My sister had sent flowers, vibrant, sunflowers that brightened our living room. My colleagues had arranged for a cake to be delivered to the house. Even Daniel's mother had called early, her voice carrying that familiar affection despite the physical distance between us. It was almost noon when my phone chimed with a message from an unknown number. I assumed it was another birthday wish, perhaps from an old friend who'd changed their contact information. That casual assumption, that ordinary moment of reaching for my phone without a second thought, now seems like the last innocent act of a different woman's life. The first image appeared without warning. Daniel, my husband, my partner, the man who had sworn his life to mine, wrapped intimately around a woman I'd never seen. Her dark hair cascaded over bare shoulders, her red-painted nails clutched possessively at the nape of his neck. They were locked in a kiss so passionate it seemed to mock every embrace he and I had ever shared. For several seconds, I couldn't process what I was seeing. My brain scrambled for explanations. An old photo from before we met, a cruel prank, a case of mistaken identity. Then I swiped to the next image, and reality crashed down around me. There were 12 photos in total, each one more intimate than the last. Each one clearly recent. I recognized the watch I'd given Daniel for our anniversary just 2 months ago. In one, they were at a restaurant I didn't recognize, toasting with champagne flutes, his wedding ring clearly visible on his hand. In another, they were entering what appeared to be a hotel room, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. The last photo was the most devastating, not because of what it showed, but because of what accompanied it. It was a selfie of a stunning woman, perhaps in her early 30s, with piercing green eyes and a smile that conveyed not just happiness, but triumph. The message beneath it read, "Happy birthday, Claire. I thought you should know how Daniel spends his time when he's working late. Enjoy your day. Vanessa." The phone slipped from my fingers, landing silently on the plush carpet. The sunflowers suddenly seemed garish, the birthday messages hollow. 15 years of marriage, a decade and a half of building a life together, of weathering. Storms and celebrating victories suddenly felt like an elaborate lie. I don't remember consciously moving to the bathroom, but I found myself kneeling on the cold tile floor, my body heaving with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere beyond my control. My reflection in the mirror was unrecognizable. A stranger with red-rimmed eyes and tear-streaked cheeks, someone broken and betrayed. Daniel called at 12:30, right on schedule, his voice cheerful and warm. "Happy birthday, beautiful. How's your day going?" I don't know how I found the strength to answer normally, to thank him for the coffee and confirm our dinner plans. Some instinct for self-preservation took over, pushing down the screams and accusations that threatened to burst forth. Instead, I heard myself say, "Everything's fine. I got some interesting messages this morning." "Oh?" His tone was light, unsuspecting. "Anything good?" "I'll tell you about it tonight," I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "It's quite revealing." After we hung up, I sat motionless on the edge of our bed, the bed where we'd made love countless times, where we'd talked about our dreams, where I'd thought we'd grown old together. Now it felt contaminated, every happy memory called into question. Who was Vanessa? How long had this been going on? Did our friends know? Was I the only one in the dark? Questions swirled like a tornado, tearing through the landscape of my life, leaving nothing intact. I returned to my phone and studied the photos more carefully, moving past the initial shock to search for clues. The restaurant had a distinctive chandelier. A quick internet search revealed it was at the Montrose, an upscale hotel downtown. The date stamp on one photo was just 3 weeks ago, while I was visiting my father after his surgery. Most telling was a detail in the background of one image, a banner for the Regional Architectural Excellence Awards. Daniel had mentioned these awards repeatedly over the past months. His firm was nominated for their design of the new public library, and the ceremony was in 2 weeks. He'd been working extra hours preparing his acceptance speech, convinced they would win. He'd even insisted I buy a new dress for the occasion. The most important night of my career, he'd called it. As I stared at that banner, something shifted inside me. The paralyzing hurt began to transform into something else, something colder and more focused. I thought about this woman, Vanessa, calculating the most painful moment to send these photos. I thought about Daniel, who would walk through our door in a few hours with rehearsed birthday wishes and practiced kisses. And I thought about the awards ceremony, where Daniel would stand in the spotlight, basking in professional admiration, believing his personal deception was safely hidden. That's when I knew this story wasn't over. It was just beginning. My husband and his mistress had written the opening chapter, but I would write the ending. And it would be an ending no one would forget. Looking back, the signs had been there for months, subtle shifts in Daniel's behavior that I'd dismissed or rationalized away. Marriage is a dance of patterns. You learn your partner's rhythm so well that even the slightest change should sound an alarm. But we're also experts at convincing ourselves that nothing is wrong, especially when confronting the truth might shatter everything. The first shift came last spring. Daniel had always been dedicated to his work at Westfield Architectural Partners, but there was a sudden intensity to his commitment that went beyond professional ambition. Late nights became the norm rather than the exception. Weekend meetings appeared on his calendar with increasing frequency. His phone, once casually left on countertops or beside the bed, became a closely guarded possession. "You never put that thing down anymore," I'd commented one evening as we prepared dinner side by side in our kitchen, a ritual that had once been sacrosanct, but had grown increasingly rare. "Sorry, Claire," he'd replied, slipping the device into his pocket with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Big project. The riverfront library could make or break the firm." I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because Daniel had always been honest, because the alternative was unthinkable. Then came the changes in his appearance. Daniel had always dressed well. It was part of the professional image, but suddenly there were new suits appearing in his closet, more expensive than his usual preferences. He started working out more frequently, monitoring his diet, using a new cologne that he claimed was just something someone at work recommended. "Are you having a midlife crisis a few years early?" I'd teased one morning as he spent extra time styling his hair. He'd laughed, but there was something defensive in his tone when he answered, "I'm just trying to keep up with the younger guys at the firm. Competition's fierce these days." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I remembered thinking how dedicated he was to his career, how much I admired his drive. Now that memory tasted bitter. The most telling change was in our intimacy. What had once been natural and frequent became scheduled and perfunctory, as if he were checking a box on his to-do list. There were new distances between us, not just physical, but emotional. Conversations that once flowed effortlessly became stilted. Silences that had once been comfortable grew heavy with unspoken words. "Is everything okay with us?" I'd asked one night after he'd turned away from my touch, claiming exhaustion. "Of course," he'd answered too quickly. "I'm just stressed about work. It'll pass once this project is done." But it didn't pass. If anything, the gulf between us widened. Daniel became an expert at offering plausible explanations for his absences, both physical and emotional. The library project, the award submission, client meetings, professional development conferences. There were other moments, too. Small inconsistencies that should have registered more strongly. The dinner receipt that fell from his pocket with a timestamp that contradicted his claim of working late. The unfamiliar woman's voice I heard in the background during a phone call that he quickly explained away as the new project manager. The weekend conference in Chicago that, when I called the hotel to surprise him with a room upgrade, had no record of his reservation. Each time, I chose trust over suspicion. Each time, I silenced the whispers of doubt. Perhaps the most obvious warning came from Melissa, my closest friend since college. During a lunch 3 months ago, she'd hesitated over her salad before carefully asking, "Is everything okay with you and Daniel?" "Of course," I'd replied automatically. "Why?" She'd shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I don't know. Something seems off whenever I see you two together lately. And Tom mentioned he ran into Daniel downtown last week with some woman from his office. They seemed close." I'd dismissed her concerns with practiced confidence. "That's probably Elaine, the senior partner. They're working on the library project together." Melissa hadn't pressed the issue, but I'd caught the doubt in her eyes. Now I wondered what exactly Tom had seen and why I'd been so quick to provide an explanation that protected my perception of my marriage. Even my sister Kate had tried to warn me in her direct way. "You're letting Daniel drift," she'd said during one of our weekly phone calls. "Men like him need constant engagement or they start looking elsewhere for validation." I'd been offended by her implication. "Daniel isn't men like him," I'd snapped. "We're fine. Busy, but fine." The final warning, the one I should have heeded above all others, came from Daniel himself. We'd been invited to his firm's summer party, a lavish affair at the managing partner's lakeside home. I'd worn a blue dress that Daniel had always loved, hoping to recapture some of the magic that seemed to be fading between us. I'd lost track of him during the evening and eventually found him on the dock, gazing out at the water. When I'd slipped my arm through his, he'd startled as if I were a stranger. "Sorry," he'd said, recovering quickly. I was lost in thought. "About what?" I'd asked, leaning into him. There had been a moment, just a flash, when something raw and conflicted crossed his face. "About choices," he'd answered. "How one decision can change everything." I'd assumed he was talking about work, about some architectural challenge. I'd responded with something supportive and generic about his talent and dedication. But now, staring at those photos on my birthday, I understood what had been happening on that dock. Daniel had been standing at a crossroads, perhaps briefly, considering confession, possibly even feeling genuine remorse. And I, blind in my trust, had unwittingly encouraged him to continue down the path of deception. As I sat in our home, surrounded by the remnants of birthday celebrations and the shattered pieces of my marriage, I realized that I had been complicit in my own betrayal. Not because I deserved what happened, but because I had ignored every warning sign that might have prepared me for this moment. The question was no longer about what I had missed, but about what I would do now that my eyes were fully opened. Daniel, and I met during my final year of graduate school. I was studying art history, preparing for a career in museum curation, while he was just starting out at a small architectural firm. Our meeting wasn't the stuff of romantic comedies. No cute misunderstandings or serendipitous encounters in the rain. We were introduced by mutual friends at a gallery opening, where he was more interested in the building's structure than the artwork on display. "The architect wasted this space," he'd said, gesturing toward a poorly lit corner where a beautiful sculpture seemed diminished by its surroundings. "Art like that deserves better consideration of light and perspective." I'd been intrigued by his passion, by the way he saw spaces as living things with purpose and potential. Our first conversation lasted hours, extending from the gallery to a nearby cafe, where we discovered shared values beneath our different interests: appreciation for beauty, respect for craft, belief in creating things that last. We married 2 years later in a ceremony that reflected both our personalities: elegant but unpretentious, traditional yet personal. The vows we exchanged weren't just romantic promises, but a practical blueprint for partnership. Daniel pledged honesty and fidelity. I promised support and understanding. We both committed to growing together rather than apart. Those early years were beautifully ordinary. We rented a small apartment in the Arts District, turning the limited space into a showcase of our combined aesthetic. His clean architectural lines softened by my preference for warm textures and historical elements. We had passionate arguments about whether form should follow function or whether beauty sometimes justified impracticality. We compromised, we learned, we built a language that was uniquely ours. Daniel's career advanced steadily. His talent for balancing innovative design with practical constraints caught the attention of larger firms. When Westfield Architectural Partners recruited him 7 years ago, we celebrated his success as a shared achievement. I had supported his late nights and working weekends. I had listened to presentations and offered feedback. I had entertained his colleagues and clients. His professional advancement felt like our collective victory. My own career path had been more circuitous. After 3 years at the Metropolitan Museum, I'd transitioned to private consulting, helping wealthy collectors build meaningful collections rather than mere investment portfolios. The work allowed me flexibility to support Daniel's more structured career while still engaging my passion for art history. We bought our house in Oakwood Heights 8 years ago, a 1920s colonial that needed significant renovation. The project became our shared obsession, with Daniel redesigning spaces while honoring the home's historical character, and me researching period-appropriate details and finishes. For months, we lived amid construction dust and paint samples, making decisions that reflected our commitment to building something lasting together. When we finally finished, the house wasn't just a structure but a physical manifestation of our marriage: thoughtful, harmonious, built to endure. Children had been part of our plan, but nature had other ideas. After 2 miscarriages and countless medical consultations, we made the difficult decision to redefine our family vision. Instead of biological children, we poured our nurturing instincts into other channels, mentoring young professionals, supporting our nieces and nephews, becoming the couple that friends entrusted with their children during emergencies or needed breaks. Our home became known for Sunday dinners where anyone was welcome, for holiday gatherings that blended traditions, for a particular kind of generous stability. "You and Daniel have the healthiest relationship I know," my friend Melissa had commented just last year. "You're like this perfect case study in communication and mutual respect." I demurred, acknowledging that we had our challenges like any couple. But secretly, I'd been proud of that perception. We had worked for that reputation, cultivated it through conscious choices and daily investments in each other. Our 15th anniversary had fallen just 3 months ago. Daniel had surprised me with a weekend trip to Savannah, where we'd honeymooned. We wandered through historic squares, took architectural tours, and spent long evenings on a hotel balcony overlooking the river. He'd given me a sapphire pendant that matched my engagement ring. Something blue to complement something old, he'd said, referencing our wedding tradition. I fingered that pendant now as I sat amid the wreckage of my birthday, realizing it had probably been a gift of guilt rather than love. Had Vanessa known about our anniversary trip? Had she been waiting for him to return, perhaps growing impatient with being the other woman? The timing of the sapphire pendant and the escalation to these birthday photos suddenly seemed connected in ways I hadn't considered. What struck me most as I reflected on our 15 years was not just the betrayal itself, but the extraordinary effort Daniel must have expended to maintain two separate narratives. Every anniversary dinner, every family holiday, every weekend project around the house, all while building a parallel relationship with another woman. The Daniel I thought I knew valued authenticity and integrity. He criticized colleagues who cut corners or misrepresented their work. How had he reconciled that professional ethics with such profound personal dishonesty? Our shared friends would be devastated by this revelation. We were the stable couple, the ones who hosted Thanksgiving when others were going through divorces, who offered our guest room during relationship rough patches. Daniel and Claire, so solid, so devoted, so trustworthy. How many of those friends already knew or suspected? How many had chosen loyalty to Daniel over truth to me? As the afternoon light shifted across our living room, the room we had painstakingly restored together, choosing each element to reflect our shared aesthetic, I felt a strange doubling of perspective. I could see the surface narrative, the successful professional couple with their tasteful home and wide social circle. And beneath it, I could now perceive the rot that had been spreading unseen, compromising the foundation we had built. Yet amid the pain and disillusionment, I recognized something important. The relationship I had participated in wasn't a lie, even if Daniel's fidelity had been. My commitment had been genuine. My love had been real. The home we created together was no less beautiful because one of its architects had been secretly building something else on the side. What we had constructed over 15 years had value, regardless of how it was ending. This realization didn't diminish my anger or heal my heartbreak. But it allowed me to begin separating what was worth preserving: my dignity, my capacity for love, my carefully cultivated life, from what needed to be discarded. A husband who had failed to honor not just his vows, but the very partnership we had both invested in so deeply. As I moved through our house, touching familiar objects that suddenly seemed like artifacts from someone else's life, I made a decision. I would not allow Daniel and Vanessa to reduce 15 years to nothing, more than a prelude to betrayal. This was my story too, and I would not surrender authorship of it. Not to them, not to anyone. What had we built together, Daniel and I? So much more than a collection of assets to be divided by divorce attorneys or memories to be sorted like photographs into keep and discard piles. We had created a shared world, intricate, valuable, and until now, I thought, unshakable. Our professional lives had become deeply intertwined. Daniel's architectural career and my art consultancy complemented each other perfectly, creating a network that benefited us both. I had introduced him to collectors who became clients for custom homes and gallery spaces. He had connected me with developers who needed expertise on art installation for their lobbies and public areas. At least 3 of his firm's major projects had come through my relationships, including the Riverfront Library that was now up for the prestigious award. "We're the perfect power couple," he'd joked at a benefit last year. "Left brain meets right brain." Everyone had laughed, nodding in appreciation of our complementary strengths. Daniel provided the structure. I added the soul. It had seemed like such a balanced equation. Our financial life reflected this partnership. We had built substantial savings and investments, always making decisions jointly about our future. The careful renovation of our historic home had nearly doubled its value. Daniel's recent promotion to senior partner at Westfield had come with a significant salary increase and equity in the firm. My consultancy business had grown steadily more exclusive and profitable. We were comfortable, secure, with plans for early retirement and extensive travel once Daniel reached 50. But our most valuable creation wasn't measured in dollars or property deeds. It was the intricate social ecosystem we had cultivated, a community that respected and relied on us. Daniel and I hosted the neighborhood's annual summer block party. We organized the local historic home tour that raised funds for preservation initiatives. Our holiday parties had become fixtures in our friends' calendars, bringing together diverse groups from our personal and professional circles. We had become known as problem solvers and stabilizers. When the Historical Society faced a funding crisis, Daniel had donated his services to redesign their visitor center, while I had organized an auction of donated artwork. When our friends Marcus and Jen went through a bitter divorce, we had somehow maintained connections with both, providing neutral ground where their children could experience normalcy amid the chaos. "I don't know how you two do it," Marcus had told me privately. "You make marriage look effortless." The irony of that statement now stung sharply. Nothing about marriage is effortless. It's a daily choice to build rather than destroy, to move toward rather than away. I had been making that choice consistently for 15 years. Daniel, it seemed, had been making a very different choice for who knows how long. There were more personal creations, too, traditions and rituals that had defined our relationship. Sunday morning crossword puzzles completed together in bed, passing. The newspaper back and forth with coffee and commentary. Our anniversary custom of writing letters to each other, stored in a mahogany box that would chronicle our journey through the decades. The elaborate birthday celebrations we planned for, each other always featuring some element of surprise. I thought of my 40th birthday dinner that Daniel had arranged for tonight, now a mockery of celebration. Would Vanessa have been involved in planning it? Had they laughed together about the deception? Or perhaps Daniel had compartmentalized so completely that he could be genuinely excited about celebrating my birthday while carrying on his affair. Then, there were the dreams we had built together, the detailed plans for our future that now seemed like elaborate fictions. We had been researching small towns in Italy where we might purchase a vacation home, perhaps splitting our retirement years between continents. We had discussed adopting a child, recently revisiting the idea after years of healing from our earlier losses. Just last month, we had talked about starting a small foundation to support architectural education for underprivileged students. All these plans, all these shared visions, what happened to them now? Could they simply be transferred to Vanessa? Like furniture being moved from one house to another? Would she step into the spaces we had created together, claiming them as if they had been designed for her all along? I picked up a framed photograph from our bookshelf, Daniel and me on a trip to Kyoto 3 years ago, standing before an ancient temple. We looked happy, connected, our bodies angled instinctively toward each other. Had he been faithful then? Or had this deception been unfolding even then, casting a shadow over memories I had treasured? The most painful realization was how much of myself I had invested in our partnership. I had adjusted career opportunities to complement his path. I had maintained our social connections when he was too busy with projects. I had been the one to remember birthdays and anniversaries, to nurture relationships with both our families, to create the emotional infrastructure that supported our life together. This investment wasn't a sacrifice I resented. It had been a conscious choice to build something I believed in. But now I questioned whether Daniel had valued this contribution or simply exploited it, benefiting from the stable, nurturing environment I created while pursuing excitement elsewhere. I walked into Daniel's home office, a space I rarely entered out of respect for his work privacy. The room reflected his architectural precision, everything arranged with intentional order, from the carefully organized reference books to the meticulously maintained drafting table. On the wall hung the framed blueprint of our home renovation, our first major project together, the physical manifestation of our shared vision. Next to his computer sat a small, smooth stone I had given him on our 5th anniversary. I had found it on a beach in Maine during a difficult period in our marriage, a time when his first major project had collapsed due to funding issues, when we were still reeling from our second miscarriage. The stone was split nearly in half, but remained whole, its crack filled with a vein of quartz that caught the light. "It's like kintsugi," I had told him, referencing the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold. Sometimes the broken places become the strongest and most beautiful parts. He had kept that stone on his desk through 3 office moves and countless home reorganizations. Did it still hold meaning for him? Or had it become just another object, maintained out of habit rather than sentiment? As I stood in his ordered space, surrounded by the evidence of our intertwined lives, I felt the full weight of what was at stake. This wasn't just about a marriage certificate or shared property. It was about 15 years of deliberate creation, a life carefully built, relationship by relationship, dream by dream, choice by choice. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing. With absolute clarity, I would not allow Daniel and Vanessa to casually dismantle what had taken years to build. If our shared creation was to end, it would end on my terms, not through the calculated cruelty of birthday photographs or the slow poison of ongoing deception. The destruction of something valuable demands acknowledgement of its worth. Before this day was over, Daniel would understand exactly what he had risked and what he had lost. The photos on my phone screen seemed to pulse with a strange energy, as if they were alive, breathing, mocking entities rather than static images. I found myself returning to them throughout the afternoon, scrutinizing details I had initially been too shocked to process. In one, Daniel and Vanessa were at what appeared to be a rooftop bar. I recognized his navy blazer, the one I had picked out during our shopping trip to Chicago last year. His arm was draped possessively around her shoulders, his head bent toward hers in that attentive way he had when truly engaged in conversation. They looked comfortable together, with the easy physical familiarity that develops over time. This wasn't new. This wasn't a momentary lapse. Another showed them walking along the riverfront near his office. It must have been taken recently. The spring flowers were in bloom, and Daniel was wearing the watch I had given him for our anniversary 3 months ago. The intentional cruelty of that detail made my breath catch. He had accepted my gift, a vintage Omega I'd spent months tracking down because it matched one his grandfather had owned, while already involved with another woman. The most intimate photos were almost unbearable to study, yet I forced myself to look. Daniel and Vanessa entering what appeared to be a hotel room. The two of them in what was clearly a romantic dinner setting, complete with candles and wine. There was one that appeared to be taken in a car, Vanessa's face close to the camera, in a playful selfie, with Daniel visible in the background, laughing. They looked happy, carefree, untroubled by the devastation they were causing. The timestamps on the photos told a damning story. The earliest was from 7 months ago, around the time Daniel had begun working more intensely on the library project. The most recent was from just last week, when he had claimed to be at a 3-day conference in Boston. I had called him each night before bed, listening to him describe panel discussions and networking events that apparently never happened. But it was the final image, Vanessa's triumphant selfie with her taunting message, that I returned to most frequently. I studied her face with clinical detachment, noting the perfect makeup, the expensive jewelry, the confident smile of a woman who believed she had won something valuable. She was beautiful in a polished, deliberate way, younger than me by perhaps 8 or 10 years, with the kind of features that photographed well from any angle. Who was she? The question burned through my mind as I paced our home. The message had come from an unknown number, but there had to be connections I could trace. I opened my laptop and began a methodical investigation. It didn't take long. Vanessa Mitchell, 32, a client relations manager at Westfield Architectural Partners, Daniel's firm. Her LinkedIn profile showed she had joined the company 11 months ago, coming from a smaller competitor across town. Her profile photo matched the woman in the birthday message. Same striking green eyes, same calculated smile. Further searches revealed more connections. She had attended the same charity gala as Daniel 3 months ago, an event I had skipped due to a migraine. There were photos from the firm's holiday party showing them standing in the same group, though at a respectable distance. Nothing incriminating. In public, of course. They had been careful, but the most devastating discovery came from Instagram. Vanessa's account was private, but she was tagged in photos by friends and colleagues. In one image from 2 months ago, she was celebrating her birthday at an upscale restaurant. The caption read, "Birthday girl living her best life." The location was tagged as the Montrose, the same hotel visible in one of the photos she had sent me. The pieces were aligning with sickening clarity. Daniel had claimed to be working late that night, the same excuse he'd used with increasing frequency. I remembered calling him around 10, hearing the background noise of what he'd explained was just the cleaning crew at the office. I had wished him good night and told him not to work too hard. Meanwhile, he had been celebrating this woman's birthday, perhaps even giving her a gift selected with the same care he had once reserved for me. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking not with sorrow now, but with rage. This wasn't a momentary indiscretion or a midlife crisis. This was a calculated, ongoing deception that had been happening right under my nose, involving people in our professional circle, taking place in locations I knew. How many others were aware? How many pitying glances had been cast my way at company functions? I moved to our bedroom, the space that had always felt most intimately ours, and began opening drawers and closets with new awareness. In Daniel's nightstand, I found nothing suspicious. His closet revealed the expected suits and casual wear, though I now recognized several new shirts and ties that had appeared in recent months, items I had attributed to his growing professional success but now suspected were chosen with another woman's approval. It was in his dresser that I found the first physical evidence. Tucked beneath his rarely worn sweaters was a small velvet pouch. Inside was a woman's bracelet, delicate silver with a small emerald charm. It wasn't a piece I recognized, certainly not something he had given me. Attached was a tiny card in Daniel's handwriting. For the moments we're apart. D. The discovery sent me to the bathroom, retching with the physical revulsion of betrayal. He had hidden another woman's jewelry in our bedroom. He had written her romantic notes in the same handwriting that signed my birthday and anniversary cards. The violation felt visceral, as if someone had reached inside my chest and squeezed. When I could breathe again, I returned to the dresser and continued my search. Behind his collection of cufflinks was a hotel keycard sleeve from the Montrose. Inside was a note in unfamiliar handwriting. "Same room next week? Can't wait." V. This was their system then. Evidence hidden in plain sight. Trusting in my respect. For his privacy. My unwillingness to invade his personal space. How perfectly they had exploited my trust. I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed we had chosen together during the renovation, testing mattresses side by side, laughing about our different preferences but ultimately finding a compromise we both loved. How many nights had I slept here, blissfully unaware that my husband was building a parallel life with another woman? The afternoon light was fading now, painting long shadows across the floor. Daniel would be home in a few hours, expecting to find his wife ready to celebrate her birthday, perhaps even genuinely looking forward to an evening of pretending to be the devoted husband. Meanwhile, his mistress had orchestrated the perfect destruction of any joy this day might have held. But As I sat surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal, something unexpected began to emerge from beneath the pain and shock. A cold, clear purpose was taking shape, a determination that surprised me with its intensity. Vanessa had chosen my birthday to reveal the affair, believing it would devastate me completely. Daniel had chosen deception over honesty, betrayal over respect, lies over the vows we had exchanged. They had both made choices that demonstrated exactly who they were. Now it was my turn to choose. And as I collected the bracelet, the hotel key, and printed copies of the photographs, I knew exactly what that choice would be. This story would not end with me as the devastated wife, the pitiful victim blindsided on her birthday. It would end with the truth exposed on my terms, in my time, in a way neither Daniel nor Vanessa could control or predict. I checked the calendar on my phone, confirming what I already knew. The Regional Architectural Excellence Awards, Daniel's moment of professional triumph, were exactly 10 days away. 10 days to plan, 10 days to prepare. 10 days until I would return the favor Vanessa had so thoughtfully bestowed on my birthday. For the first time since receiving those photographs, I felt a smile spread across my face. It wasn't a smile of happiness. It was the smile of absolute clarity and purpose. Daniel arrived home at 6:30, exactly as planned. I heard his key in the lock, the familiar sound of his briefcase being set down in the foyer, his footsteps moving through the house. I had positioned myself in the living room, seated in the armchair facing the entrance. I had changed into the dress I'd bought for the evening, a deep burgundy sheath that he had always said brought out the warmth in my complexion. My makeup was flawless, hair styled exactly as he preferred. On the surface, nothing betrayed the earthquake that had shattered my world hours earlier. "There's my birthday girl," he called out, his voice light and affectionate. He appeared in the doorway holding a bouquet of peonies, my favorites, and wearing a smile that once would have made my heart race. Now I saw it with new eyes, the practiced charm, the confidence of a man who believed his deception was perfect. I stood to accept the flowers, allowing him to kiss my cheek. His cologne, the new one I now realized he hadn't chosen for me at all, lingered as he pulled away. "You look stunning," he said, eyes moving appreciatively over my dress. "I almost feel underdressed now. Give me 15 minutes to shower and change?" I nodded, maintaining the smile I had rehearsed in the mirror. "Take your time. Our reservation isn't until 8. As he disappeared upstairs, I placed the flowers in a vase, moving with mechanical precision. Were these bought from the same florist who provided arrangements for Vanessa? Did he recycle romantic gestures between us, or did he compartmentalize completely, keeping separate playbooks for wife and mistress? I heard the shower running and imagined him washing away any trace of his workday, or perhaps any lingering scent of another woman. The thought didn't trigger tears as it might have hours ago. I had moved beyond the initial shock into something cooler and more focused. When Daniel returned downstairs, he was wearing the charcoal suit I had given him for Christmas, paired with a tie that complemented my dress perfectly. The coordinated outfit wasn't coincidental. It was part of the image we had cultivated as the perfect couple, always in harmony, even in our clothing choices. "You remembered the tie," I commented, adjusting it slightly at his collar. "Of course," he replied, catching my hand and kissing it. "Tonight is special. 40 years of my favorite person deserves proper celebration." The ease with which he delivered these lines, tender, seemingly heartfelt, was remarkable. If I hadn't seen the photos, I would have believed every word, every gesture. The realization was chilling. I had been married to an accomplished actor for 15 years. The restaurant he had chosen was Le Jardin, an exclusive French establishment where we had celebrated several anniversaries. The maitre d' greeted us by name, leading us to our table in a secluded corner with a view of the garden. A bottle of champagne was already chilling in a silver bucket. Monsieur Roberts arranged everything in advance, the maitre d' explained, with a discreet smile, including a special menu prepared by Chef Marcel. I thanked him, watching Daniel's expression of satisfaction. He had always enjoyed orchestrating perfect moments, curating experiences that demonstrated his thoughtfulness and attention to detail. I wondered if he arranged similar experiences for Vanessa. Did she also have her table at special restaurants? Did he memorize her preferences with the same diligence he had once shown for mine? Throughout dinner, I observed Daniel with the detached fascination of an anthropologist studying an unknown culture. He was attentive, charming, fully present, asking questions about my day, sharing amusing anecdotes from work, reminiscing about birthdays past. Not once did his phone appear at the table. Not once did his gaze wander. To any observer, we were the picture of marital harmony, a successful couple celebrating a milestone birthday with champagne and intimate conversation. "I have something for you," he said after the dessert plates had been cleared. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small box, the distinctive robin's egg blue of Tiffany's. My stomach tightened, but I maintained my composed exterior as I accepted the gift. Inside was a platinum bracelet with a small diamond, charm in the shape of a key. "It's beautiful," I said, because it was. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the design elegant and understated, exactly my taste. "The key to my heart," Daniel explained, his expression tender as he fastened the bracelet around my wrist. "Though you've had that for 15 years now," the sigh. Irony was almost unbearable. Here was my husband, giving me a symbolic key to a heart he had already shared with another woman. I wondered if Vanessa had received jewelry tonight as well. Perhaps a consolation gift after delivering her cruel birthday message. The emerald bracelet hidden in Daniel's dresser suggested he was generous with both women in his life. "I love it," I lied, turning my wrist to catch the light. "Thank you." He looked relieved and pleased, as if he had passed some test. Perhaps in his mind, a successful birthday celebration would erase whatever guilt he harbored about his ongoing betrayal. Over coffee, Daniel shared his excitement about the upcoming award ceremony. "The firm is almost certain to win for the library design," he explained, eyes bright with anticipation. "The committee feedback has been overwhelmingly positive." "You deserve it," I replied truthfully. Whatever his personal failings, Daniel was a talented architect. The library project represented some of his best work, innovative yet practical, beautiful yet functional. "I'm looking forward to the ceremony." "You'll need to prepare for photos," he said with a smile. "The architectural press will be there, and as senior partner, I'll be front and center if we win." I nodded, imagining the scene he described. Daniel accepting the award, basking in professional admiration, his loyal wife at his side. The perfect couple, the perfect image, the perfect lie. "I've already chosen my dress," I assured him. "Everything will be perfect." As we drove home, Daniel reached for my hand across the console, interlacing our fingers as he had countless times before. His hand felt the same, warm, slightly calloused from years of drawing and modeling. But the sensation was entirely different now that I knew where those hands had been, what they had touched, who they had caressed. At home, he poured us each a nightcap, the special scotch he saved for celebrations. We stood in our kitchen, glasses, raised in a toast. "To 40 extraordinary years," he said, eyes meeting mine. "And to many more together." I clinked my glass against his and smiled. "To getting exactly what we deserve." He didn't catch the double meaning, didn't notice the subtle shift in my tone. He was too secure in his deception, too confident in his ability to maintain both worlds, without consequence. Later, when he reached for me in our bed, I didn't refuse him. I watched his face in the darkness, studied the expressions that once seemed genuine and loving, but now appeared calculated and hollow. This man who moved with such practiced tenderness had touched another woman with the same apparent devotion. This man who whispered familiar endearments had likely whispered similar words to Vanessa. As he drifted to sleep beside me, arm draped possessively across my waist, I remained awake, staring at the ceiling. The performance of this birthday celebration, his careful attention, thoughtful gift, romantic dinner, was particularly cruel in light of Vanessa's revelation. Had he known what she planned to do? Was this elaborate evening designed to counter the damage, to convince me that whatever I might have heard or suspected was wrong? Or did he truly believe he could maintain both relationships indefinitely, compartmentalizing his life so completely that neither woman would ever fully know the man they loved? Either way, as I listened to his steady breathing in the darkness, I made a silent promise. This would be the last time Daniel Roberts underestimated me. The next morning, I woke before Daniel and watched him sleep, studying the face I had believed I knew better than my own. In repose, he looked exactly the same as he had for 15 years. The slight furrow between his brows that never fully relaxed, the faint smile that sometimes played at the corners of his mouth during pleasant dreams. Nothing external revealed, the duplicity beneath. When his alarm sounded, he reached for me automatically, pressing a sleepy kiss to my shoulder before rolling out of bed. Our morning routine unfolded with practiced familiarity. Daniel in the shower while I prepared coffee, a quick breakfast together at the kitchen island, a brief discussion of our day's schedules. If he noticed anything unusual in my demeanor, he didn't comment on it. "I'll be late tonight," he said, straightening his tie in the hallway mirror. "Final preparations for the award presentation. Don't wait up." The office must be excited about the potential win, I remarked casually. "Is the whole team involved in the preparations?" "Mostly just the core design group," he replied, gathering his briefcase. "Oh, and Vanessa from client relations. She's coordinating the PR aspects." My hand tightened around my coffee mug, but my face revealed nothing. He had offered her name so easily, so naturally, slipping it into conversation as if it held no significance beyond professional collaboration. "Vanessa," I repeated, testing the name. "I don't think I've met her." Daniel shrugged, already moving toward the door. "She's relatively new. Been with the firm about a year. You'll meet her at the ceremony. She's coordinating all the press coverage and client attendance." With a quick kiss goodbye, he was gone, off to a day that would undoubtedly include the woman who had sent me those devastating photos. As soon as his car disappeared down the street, I moved into action. The 10 days before the awards ceremony would require careful planning if my response was to have maximum impact. This wouldn't be an impulsive reaction, but a deliberate strategy. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I called my office and arranged to work remotely for the week, citing birthday celebrations extending into a mini vacation. Then I began a methodical investigation of Daniel's deception. Our home office contained a filing cabinet where we kept important documents. The bottom drawer was Daniel's: tax records, professional certifications, personal correspondence. I had respected his privacy for 15 years, never feeling the need to examine these papers. Now I went through them meticulously, looking for anything that might reveal the extent of his betrayal. Most of the contents were exactly what I expected, but in a folder labeled Professional Development, I found hotel receipts that didn't correspond to any business trips Daniel had discussed with me. Credit card statements showed regular charges at the Montrose, always on Wednesday evenings, when he claimed to have late client meetings. There were receipts from jewelry stores for items I had never received, restaurant bills for places we had never visited together. Next, I turned to technology. Daniel and I had shared passwords early in our marriage, a gesture of transparency that we had maintained over the years. He had likely forgotten that I had access to his personal email, or perhaps he had created separate accounts for his communication with Vanessa. His work laptop required a password I didn't know, but his personal tablet was accessible with our shared code. The browser history had been regularly cleared, unusual for Daniel, who typically didn't bother with such precautions. But the cloud storage contained backups of photos and documents that told their own story. There were no explicit images, but I found dozens of photos of Vanessa, sometimes alone, sometimes with Daniel, all carefully segregated from the family albums and work portfolios. There were screenshots of text exchanges, saved perhaps as mementos of their connection. Reading through them, I pieced together a relationship that had begun shortly after Vanessa joined the firm and had intensified dramatically over the past 6 months. The most revealing discovery came from Daniel's calendar. While his primary schedule showed client meetings and work commitments, a separate calendar labeled personal projects tracked what were clearly rendezvous with Vanessa. Wednesday evenings at the Montrose were indeed regular occurrences. There were weekend site visits that aligned with times he had claimed to be at professional conferences. Most damning was an upcoming entry. Weekend away, Montauk, scheduled for the weekend after the awards ceremony. He was planning a getaway with her, even as he maintained the facade of our marriage. The calculated nature of it, the separate calendar, the organized documentation, the systematic lies, was somehow more painful than the affair itself. By mid-afternoon, I had compiled enough evidence to understand that this wasn't a brief indiscretion or a midlife crisis. This was a sustained double life, meticulously maintained for months. The question now wasn't whether my marriage could be saved, but how I would respond to its destruction. I considered the conventional options. Confronting Daniel immediately seeking marriage counseling, filing for divorce. Each had its merits, but none felt sufficient to address the magnitude of the betrayal or the particular cruelty of Vanessa's birthday revelation. No. This situation called for something more nuanced. A response that would expose the truth while maintaining my dignity, that would ensure both Daniel and Vanessa understood exactly what they had destroyed. The awards ceremony presented the perfect opportunity. Daniel had worked toward this professional recognition for years. Westfield Architectural Partners' reputation would be significantly enhanced by the award, with Daniel as the face of their success. The event would be attended by everyone who mattered in their industry: clients, competitors, press, potential investors. It was, in short, the setting where Daniel and his firm had the most to lose. I began making calls, carefully, discreetly, to people who could help implement what I was envisioning. My first call was to Thomas Wright, a senior editor at Architectural Digest whom I had befriended during a charity event last year. "Claire, lovely to hear from you," he greeted me warmly. "How are things?" "Complicated, Thomas," I replied honestly. "I need your professional discretion about a sensitive matter." By the end of our conversation, Thomas understood that I had a story that would interest his publication, one involving ethical concerns at a major architectural firm currently being considered for a prestigious award. He didn't need all the details yet, but he agreed to attend the ceremony as my guest, promising to bring his most trusted photographer. Next, I contacted Clara Bennett, the head of the Regional Architectural Excellence Awards Committee, and a woman I had worked with on several museum installation projects. "I understand this is unusual," I said after explaining my request. "But I believe the integrity of the awards depends on the committee having all relevant information before the final decision." Clara was understandably cautious, but her commitment to professional ethics ultimately outweighed her concerns about protocol. She agreed to review the documentation I would provide and to meet with me privately before the ceremony. My third call was to Marcus Rodriguez, the client whose library project was at the center of the award nomination. Marcus had worked closely with Daniel for over a year, entrusting Westfield with the largest public project the city had commissioned in a decade. "I value transparency above all else in business relationships," Marcus said after hearing my carefully worded explanation. If there are concerns about how this project has been represented, I want to know. These alliances formed the foundation of my plan, but the most difficult call was to Liam Mitchell, Vanessa's husband of 3 years. I had discovered his existence during my research, a software engineer who traveled frequently for work, which perhaps explained Vanessa's ability to conduct her affair with relative ease. I debated whether involving him was appropriate. Hurting another innocent party wasn't my goal. But ultimately, I decided that Liam deserved the same knowledge that had been forced upon me. The decision of what to do with that information would be his to make. Finding his contact information required some creative searching, but by late afternoon, I had a direct number. Mr. Mitchell? My name is Claire Roberts. You don't know me, but I believe we have something important to discuss regarding our spouses. The silence that followed was heavy with comprehension. When Liam finally spoke, his voice was guarded but not surprised, as if he had harbored suspicions of his own. I'm listening. As the sun began to set on the first day of my new reality, I sat in our garden surrounded by notes, documents, and a detailed timeline of the upcoming 10 days. The foundation was laid. Now I needed to prepare myself for what would come next. Not just the public revelation, but the private reckoning. That would follow. This wasn't about revenge, though that would be a natural assumption. This was about truth, about bringing to light what had been deliberately kept in shadow. This was about consequences, ensuring that choices made in secret would be acknowledged openly. Most importantly, this was about reclaiming my narrative, refusing to be cast as the oblivious wife or the pitiful victim in a story written by others. As night fell, I made one final call to my sister Kate, the only person who would understand completely what I was feeling and what I planned to do. It's worse than I thought, I told her, finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of the day's discoveries. What do you need? She asked simply, no judgment or platitudes, just unconditional support. A place to stay after it's done, I replied. And someone to remind me why this is necessary. You have both, Kate promised, for as long as you need. The next 9 days unfolded in a carefully choreographed dance between the life I was pretending to maintain and the response I was meticulously planning. Daniel remained oblivious, his confidence in his deception unwavering. Each morning he left for work with a kiss and a casual reminder about the upcoming awards ceremony. Each evening he returned with stories about the office's growing excitement over their likely win. The whole team is putting in extra hours, he explained one night as we prepared dinner together. The recognition could transform the firm's reputation nationally. I nodded sympathetically, chopping vegetables with practiced precision. You've all worked so hard, especially you. And Vanessa, he added, the name falling from his lips so naturally it was almost impressive. She's coordinated an incredible media strategy. If we win, we'll have features in at least 3 major design publications. How fortunate that she joined the firm when she did, I remarked, my tone revealing nothing. Seems like perfect timing. Daniel smiled, reaching past me for the wine bottle. Sometimes the right people come into your life exactly when you need them. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. In his mind, he was likely referring to Vanessa's professional contributions. In reality, he had inadvertently acknowledged the affair that was about to upend his carefully constructed world. During those 9 days, I maintained a flawless performance of normalcy, the devoted wife preparing to support her husband's professional triumph. I confirmed my salon appointment for the day of the ceremony, discussed which of my dresses would photograph best against the backdrop of the venue, and even helped Daniel refine his acceptance speech. If he noticed anything unusual in my behavior, he attributed it to birthday celebrations or perhaps excitement about the upcoming event. Meanwhile, my real focus was elsewhere. I met with Thomas Wright from Architectural Digest at a cafe far from Daniel's office, providing him with carefully selected details about ethical concerns at Westfield without revealing the personal dimension of the story. I emphasized the public interest angle, the integrity of a major architectural award, the transparency owed to clients like the City Library Board. This could be explosive, Thomas warned, reviewing the documents I had brought. Once this is published, there's no going back. I understand, I assured him. I've considered the implications carefully. Clara Bennett from the awards committee required more concrete evidence. During our private meeting in her office, I provided documentation showing discrepancies between what had been submitted to the committee and the actual development process of the library project. These design elements were credited solely to Daniel Roberts, I explained, pointing to specific architectural features. But the original concepts came from a junior architect who was never acknowledged. Clara frowned, her commitment to professional ethics clearly troubled by this revelation. This isn't just about credit, it's about honesty in the submission process itself. Exactly, I agreed. The question is whether the committee wants to present its highest honor to a project built on misrepresentation. My most difficult meeting was with Liam Mitchell, Vanessa's husband. We met at a quiet bar on the other side of town, both of us nervous and guarded. Liam was younger than I expected, with kind eyes and a reserved manner that contrasted sharply with Daniel's confident charm. He listened intently as I outlined what I had discovered, asking occasional clarifying questions, but mostly absorbing the information in silence. When I showed him the photographs Vanessa had sent me, his expression hardened, the last vestiges of doubt clearly erased. "I've been traveling a lot," he said finally, staring into his untouched drink. 3, sometimes 4 days a week. I thought we were solid enough to handle the distance. "I understand," I replied quietly. I believed my marriage was built on something unshakable too. We talked for hours, comparing timelines and realizations, filling in gaps in each other's understanding of the affair. Unlike me, Liam had noticed subtle changes in his wife's behavior. New clothes, increased secrecy about her phone, sudden work emergencies that required her attention on weekends. He had questioned her once, only to be met with tearful accusations of distrust and lack of support for her career. "She made me feel like I was the problem," he said, his voice hollow. Like my suspicions were just insecurity or jealousy. By the end of our conversation, we had reached an understanding about the awards ceremony and what would happen there. Liam's participation was crucial to my plan, and though he was understandably reluctant to create a public scene, he recognized the importance of confronting the truth openly. "I can't pretend I didn't know," he said as we parted. "Not anymore." The most practical preparations involved the ceremony itself. I needed to ensure access for the right people at the right time, with contingency plans for various possible scenarios. I studied the venue layout, the event schedule, and the seating arrangements. I confirmed my role in the evening's proceedings. As senior partner's wife, I would be seated at the main Westfield table, closest to the stage. Most importantly, I prepared what I would say and how I would say it. This wasn't about public humiliation or emotional outbursts. This was about controlled revelation, about shifting the narrative from private betrayal to public accountability. The day before the ceremony, I met with Kate to finalize the aftermath arrangements. She had prepared her guest room for an extended stay and had taken time off work to provide whatever support I needed. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" she asked as we reviewed the plan one final time. "There are other ways to handle infidelity, you know, ways that don't involve public confrontation." I considered her question carefully. If this were just about infidelity, I might agree. But it's about calculated cruelty. It's about professional ethics as much as personal betrayal. And it's about refusing to be silenced or sidelined in my own life. Kate studied my face, then nodded slowly. You've always been stronger than people give you credit for, Daniel included. On the morning of the ceremony, I awoke with a clarity and calm that surprised me. The hurricane of emotions that had been raging since the birthday photographs had settled into a focused determination. I packed a small suitcase with essentials for the coming days and hid it in my car trunk. I confirmed final arrangements with Thomas, Clara, and Liam via secure messages that wouldn't leave traces on my regular accounts. When Daniel emerged from the shower, I was already dressed in a simple outfit for the day, saving my ceremony attire for later. "Big day," he said, his expression a mix of excitement and nervous energy. "Are you ready for tonight?" I met his eyes steadily, allowing myself one moment of complete honesty before resuming the performance. "I've been preparing for this longer than you know." He laughed, mistaking my meaning. That's my Claire, always thinking ahead. As he left for a final meeting at the office before the evening's events, he kissed me goodbye with the casual affection of a man who believed his world was secure and his secrets were safe. "I'll see you at the venue," he said. 6 o'clock, VIP entrance. I'll have Vanessa meet you in the lobby to show you to our table." I smiled, the perfect supportive wife. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The door closed behind him, and I stood alone in the house we had built together, surrounded by the life we had created and the truth that would soon dismantle it all. Tonight, Daniel would discover what I had learned on my birthday, that sometimes the most devastating revelations come at moments of celebration when we're least prepared to defend against them. The difference was that my revelation wouldn't arrive in cowardly digital messages from a hidden sender. Mine would be delivered face-to-face in a room full of witnesses with nowhere to hide and no way to control the narrative. I checked my appearance one last time in the hallway mirror, composed, dignified, prepared. Then I picked up my phone and sent a single message to Liam, Thomas, and Clara. Confirmed. Proceeding as planned. The Metropolitan Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed for the Regional Architectural Excellence Awards. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables draped in white linen, each centered with architectural-inspired arrangements of geometric florals. Along the walls, digital displays showcased the nominated projects, including prominent images of the Riverfront Library, Daniel's crowning achievement. I arrived precisely at 6 o'clock, wearing a midnight blue gown that I had selected with meticulous care. The color was sophisticated and camera-friendly. The cut was elegant but conservative. This wasn't a night for flash or distraction. What would happen needed no embellishment. As Daniel had arranged, Vanessa was waiting in the lobby to escort me inside. Seeing her in person after studying her photographs was jarring, like encountering a character from a film suddenly made flesh. She wore a form-fitting crimson dress, her dark hair swept into an elaborate updo that showcased diamond earrings I recognized from Daniel's secret jewelry. Receipts. "Mrs. Roberts," she greeted me with professional courtesy, extending her hand. "I'm Vanessa Mitchell, Client Relations Manager. Daniel asked me to show you to your table." I accepted her handshake, noting the slight tremble in her fingers, the only outward sign of her awareness of who I was beyond Daniel's wife. Did she regret sending those photographs now that we stood face to face? Or was she secretly enjoying this charade of professional detachment? "How thoughtful of him," I replied, my voice pleasant and controlled. "And please call me Claire. After all, I feel like I know you already." Her eyes widened slightly before she recovered her composure. "Of course. Claire, follow me, please." As we walked through the growing crowd, I observed her carefully. The way she navigated the room with practiced confidence, nodding to industry figures, pausing for brief exchanges with colleagues. This was her professional environment, a space where she felt secure and in control. By the end of the evening, that security would be shattered. The Westfield table was prominently positioned near the stage. Daniel was already seated, deep in conversation with the firm's founding partner and several clients. When he saw me approaching, he stood, his face lighting with what appeared to be genuine pleasure. "Claire," he said warmly, kissing my cheek. "You look stunning." "Thank you," I replied, accepting the compliment with a smile that revealed nothing of my intentions. "It's an important night. I wanted to do it justice." Daniel beamed, introducing me around the table to colleagues and clients. I played my part perfectly, the cultured, supportive spouse who understood enough about architecture to engage intelligently but never overshadow her husband. I'd performed this role countless times at firm functions, but tonight it felt like wearing a costume in a particularly dark play. Vanessa took her seat across the table, positioned where she could easily catch Daniel's eye without being too obvious. Throughout the pre-dinner mingling, I observed their careful dance of professional interaction. Brief exchanges that appeared innocent to others but were laden with private meaning. Once, when Daniel left to greet a potential client, I caught Vanessa watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Not quite guilt, not quite defiance, but something uncomfortably between the two. I met her gaze directly until she looked away, busying herself with her phone. As dinner was served, I checked my own phone discreetly. A message from Liam confirmed he had arrived and was positioned in the lobby, waiting for my signal. Thomas, from Architectural Digest, was already inside, seated at a media table with his photographer. Clara from the awards committee had acknowledged receipt of my final documentation and had spoken privately with the committee chairman. Everything was in place. The ceremony began after dessert, with the chairman of the awards committee taking the stage to welcome attendees and outline the evening's proceedings. 5 categories of architectural excellence would be recognized, with the Public Space Innovation Award, the category for which Daniel's library was nominated, scheduled last as the evening's highlight. Daniel's leg bounced nervously under the table as the first awards were presented. I placed my hand gently on his knee, a gesture of support, that he acknowledged with a grateful glance. How strange to provide comfort to the man whose betrayal I was about to expose. Stranger still to feel a flicker of genuine sympathy for the humiliation he would soon face. As the public space category approached, Daniel excused himself briefly. "Need to visit the restroom before the big moment," he whispered. I nodded, watching as he made his way out of the ballroom. Vanessa's phone lit up moments later. She glanced at it, then stood. "I need to check on some press arrangements," she murmured to no one in particular, following Daniel's path out of the ballroom. So transparent, I thought. Even now, they couldn't resist stealing a moment together, perhaps a good luck kiss or whispered words of encouragement. Their arrogance was almost impressive, the belief that their coordinated exits wouldn't be noticed or understood. While they were gone, I sent a single text to Liam. Now. 3 minutes later, Daniel returned to the table, adjusting his tie and looking slightly flushed. Vanessa reappeared shortly after, having taken a different path back to avoid suspicion. Neither noticed Liam Mitchell entering the ballroom and taking a position near the back wall, where I had suggested he wait. The chairman returned to the podium. We now come to our final and most prestigious award of the evening, the Public Space Innovation Award. This year's submissions were exceptional, showcasing architectural vision that transforms how communities interact with shared spaces. Daniel straightened in his chair, his expression shifting to focused anticipation. The founding partner clapped him on the shoulder supportively. Across the table, Vanessa watched Daniel with undisguised admiration. The committee has carefully evaluated each submission based on design innovation, functionality, community impact, and ethical development practices. The chairman paused meaningfully on those last words, his gaze sweeping across the room. Before announcing this year's recipient, the committee chair has asked to share some remarks on the importance of integrity in our profession. Daniel frowned, slightly, this deviation from the expected program catching his attention. Clara Bennett approached the podium, her expression solemn as she adjusted the microphone. Architecture is built on trust, Clara began. Trust between firms and clients, between senior partners and junior designers, between the profession and the public we serve. When that trust is compromised, when credit is misappropriated, when contributions are obscured, when submissions contain misrepresentations, the very foundation of our work is undermined. A murmur ran through the audience. Daniel's posture stiffened, his earlier confidence visibly faltering. This evening, the committee received documented evidence of serious ethical concerns regarding one of our nominated projects, Clara continued. After emergency deliberation, we have made the unprecedented decision to withdraw the Riverfront Library project from consideration. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Daniel's face drained of color as he turned to the founding partner, who was staring at him with dawning horror. Vanessa's hand flew to her throat, her eyes darting frantically between Daniel and the stage. Furthermore, Clara added, her voice cutting through the growing commotion, the committee has referred these concerns to the American Institute of Architects Ethics Committee for formal review. Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is a mistake," he called out, his voice strained but forceful. "There must be some misunderstanding." Clara met his gaze directly. "The documentation was quite clear, Mr. Roberts, including your internal communications about deliberately obscuring contributions from junior architects and misrepresenting development timelines." The ballroom had fallen completely silent now, all eyes fixed on Daniel as he struggled to comprehend what was happening. This was my moment, the fulcrum point where private betrayal would intersect with public accountability. I stood slowly, my movement drawing all eyes to me. "Perhaps I can clarify the situation," I said, my voice calm but carrying clearly across the hushed room. Daniel turned to me, confusion giving way to dawning comprehension as he finally, too late, recognized that something had fundamentally shifted in our relationship. "Claire," he said quietly, a warning and a plea combined. "This isn't the place." I smiled sadly. "On the contrary, Daniel. After careful consideration, I believe this is exactly the right place to discuss both your professional ethics and your personal integrity." The room had fallen completely silent. Every eye was fixed on me as I stood beside Daniel, whose face reflected a dawning horror as he began to understand what was happening. "For those who don't know me," I began, my voice steady and clear, "I'm Claire Roberts, Daniel's wife of 15 years. Until recently, I believed I was married to a man of integrity, someone who valued honesty in both his professional and personal life." Daniel reached for my arm. "Claire, please," he whispered urgently. "Whatever you think you know," I gently removed his hand. "What I know, Daniel, is exactly what you've been doing. With whom? And for how long?" A collective intake of breath swept through the room. The founding partner of Westfield was half standing, clearly torn between intervening and letting the scene play out. 10 days ago, on my 40th birthday, I continued, I received a series of photographs from Vanessa Mitchell, your firm's client relations manager. I turned slightly to where Vanessa sat frozen, her face drained of color. Photographs documenting their months-long affair, sent specifically to cause me pain on what should have been a day of celebration. Vanessa shook her head frantically. "That's not... I didn't..." she stammered, looking desperately around the table for support that wasn't coming. "What Vanessa didn't realize," I said, addressing the room rather than her directly, was that her cruelty would lead to a much more thorough investigation than she intended, one that uncovered not just personal betrayal, but professional misconduct. I reached into my evening bag and withdrew a slim folder, opening it to reveal printed copies of emails and design documents. While examining the timeline of their relationship, I discovered concerning discrepancies in how the Riverfront Library project was developed and credited. Discrepancies that the awards committee has now confirmed. Daniel's professional composure, finally cracked. "You had no right," he hissed, his voice low but intense. "Those were private files." "Like the private photos your mistress sent me?" I asked, my tone remaining measured. "Or perhaps you mean the private hotel receipts you hid? In our home? The private messages you exchanged while lying about working late?" The founding partner had heard enough. He stood fully now, attempting to salvage what he could of the firm's reputation. "Ladies and gentlemen, clearly this is a private matter that has unfortunately spilled into a professional setting. I suggest we—" "With respect, Mr. Westfield," I interrupted. "This ceased to be a private matter when Daniel and Vanessa chose to conduct their affair within your firm, using company resources and time while misrepresenting their relationship to colleagues and clients." From the back of the room, a figure moved forward, Liam Mitchell, his expression grim but determined as he approached our table. Vanessa saw him and visibly flinched, her hand gripping the edge of the tablecloth. "Liam," she whispered, the name barely audible in the tense silence. "Hello, Vanessa," he replied, his voice remarkably controlled. Surprise! The room had become a theater of uncomfortable witnesses. Colleagues, competitors, and clients watching a drama none of them had expected to attend. Thomas from Architectural Digest was taking discreet notes, his photographer capturing images that would likely accompany whatever story emerged from this evening. Daniel made one last attempt to regain control. "I apologize for this disruption," he announced to the room, his professional mask slipping back into place. "My wife is clearly upset and has misinterpreted—" "I didn't misinterpret anything," I cut in, opening my phone to display one of the images Vanessa had sent. "And I'm not the one who should be apologizing." I held the phone toward Daniel, then turned it so Liam could see. "Perhaps you'd like to explain this to Vanessa's husband? Or shall we display it on the screens for everyone's clarity?" Daniel's face contorted with a mixture of rage and fear. "You wouldn't." "I didn't," I corrected him. "I could have forwarded these images to everyone in this room the moment I received them. I could have posted them online or sent them to your clients. That would have been the equivalent of what Vanessa did to me on my birthday." I turned to face the room, making eye contact with key figures: the committee chair, the founding partner, the major clients. Instead, I chose to focus on the professional ethics violations that this personal situation brought to light. Because, ultimately, this isn't just about infidelity. It's about character. It's about whether someone who would betray the trust of their spouse and colleagues deserves to be celebrated as a paragon of professional achievement. The room remained silent, but the atmosphere had shifted. What had begun as voyeuristic discomfort was transforming into something more complex, a collective reckoning with uncomfortable truths about power, ethics, and accountability. Liam stepped forward to stand beside me, addressing his wife directly for the first time. "Vanessa, I think it's time for us to leave. We have a lot to discuss in private." Vanessa looked desperately toward Daniel, but he had turned away, already engaged in urgent, whispered conversation with the founding partner. The abandonment was so swift, so complete, that even I felt a flash of sympathy for her. "Daniel?" she said, her voice small and uncertain. He didn't even look at her. Liam extended his hand to Vanessa, not in forgiveness but in dignity. "Let's go home, Vanessa." After a moment's hesitation, she took his offered hand and stood, her earlier confidence entirely evaporated. As they walked out together, the room's collective attention returned to Daniel and me. "The awards committee will announce our revised decision shortly," Clara said from the podium, attempting to restore some semblance of order to the proceedings. "Please enjoy refreshments in the adjoining room while we complete our deliberations." This provided the escape valve the tense room needed. People began to rise, moving awkwardly toward the exits, conversations erupting in hushed, urgent tones. I had no doubt that every detail of what had just transpired would be dissected and distributed throughout the architectural community by morning. Daniel remained rooted in place, his professional life visibly crumbling around him. The founding partner had been joined by two other senior executives, their body language conveying unmistakable fury and concern. Nearby, Marcus Rodriguez, the library project client, was already on his phone, likely calling an emergency meeting of the city's oversight committee. "Why did you do this?" Daniel finally asked me, his voice hollow. "You could have confronted me privately. You could have filed for divorce quietly. Why here? Why like this?" I studied him. This man I had loved and supported for 15 years. This stranger who had betrayed everything we had built together. "Because choices have consequences, Daniel," I said quietly. "You and Vanessa chose to conduct your affair in the shadows, believing your positions and charm would protect you from accountability. You chose to send cruel, deliberate messages on my birthday, believing I would collapse in private pain while you continued your double life." I gathered my evening bag and wrap, preparing to leave. "I simply chose to bring those actions into the light, where they could be seen clearly for what they are." His face hardened. "You've destroyed everything. My career, my reputation." "No," I interrupted firmly. "You destroyed those things yourself. I merely declined to be complicit in the cover-up." As I turned to walk away, Thomas Wright approached, his expression professionally neutral. "Mrs. Roberts, would you be willing to provide a statement for our coverage of tonight's events?" I considered the request carefully, aware that my response would shape the narrative that emerged from this evening. "The only statement I'd like to make is this: integrity matters, in both personal and professional contexts. When it's compromised in one area, it's often compromised in others as well." Thomas nodded, making a note. "And what happens now?" I smiled, slightly, feeling the first genuine sense of liberation since receiving those devastating photographs. Now I focus on rebuilding my life on a foundation of truth rather than illusion. Beyond that, I'll leave the consequences to play out naturally. Some things can't be managed or controlled, no matter how carefully you try to design them. With that, I walked through the dispersing crowd toward the exit, where Kate was waiting with the car that would take me to her home, to the fresh start that awaited beyond this evening of revelation and reckoning. Behind me, Daniel remained. At the table, surrounded by the wreckage of the carefully constructed world he had believed he could control. Whatever happened next would be his story to navigate, without me as supporting character or convenient backdrop. For the first time in 15 years, our narratives had truly separated. And despite the pain and public nature of this division, I felt lighter with each step toward the door, unburdened by the weight of deception I had been unwittingly carrying for far too long. The morning after the awards ceremony dawned with surreal clarity. I woke in Kate's guest room, momentarily disoriented before the events of the previous night came flooding back. My phone, which I had switched to silent, showed 17 missed calls from Daniel, along with dozens of text messages ranging from furious accusations to desperate pleas. I set it aside without reading further. Kate was already in the kitchen, coffee brewing and toast prepared. She didn't ask how I was feeling. We were close enough that such questions were unnecessary. Instead, she pushed a newspaper across the counter toward me. "Front page," she said simply. The headline was understated but unmistakable. "Ethical Concerns Derail Architectural Award. Personal Scandal Exposed." Below was a photograph of Daniel at the podium from an earlier part of the evening, his expression confident and untroubled. A man who believed himself at the pinnacle of professional success, unaware of what was about to unfold. I skimmed the article, noting its careful balance between reporting the professional misconduct allegations and acknowledging the personal dimension that had brought them to light. My name appeared only briefly, described as Daniel Roberts' wife, who provided documentation of ethical violations to the awards committee. Vanessa was mentioned even more peripherally, identified only as a firm employee with whom Roberts was allegedly involved. "They've been surprisingly restrained," Kate observed, watching me read. "I expected more sensationalism." I nodded, folding the paper closed. "Thomas Wright is a professional. He understands this isn't about creating scandal, it's about accountability." We sat in comfortable silence, sipping coffee and watching the morning light strengthen outside. The weight of the previous night's confrontation should have felt heavier, but instead, I experienced an unexpected lightness. As if by speaking truth publicly, I had shed a burden I hadn't fully acknowledged. "Do you regret any of it?" Kate asked finally, her tone free of judgment. I considered the question carefully. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret discovering that my marriage was built on such a fragile foundation. But the actions I took?" I shook my head. "No, those I don't regret." The days that followed unfolded with a strange mixture of chaos and clarity. Daniel's attempts to contact me grew increasingly desperate, then abruptly ceased, likely on advice from whatever crisis management team Westfield had engaged. My lawyer reported that divorce papers had been filed, with preliminary financial disclosures that suggested Daniel was preparing for a significant settlement. "He knows he has no leverage," my lawyer explained during our consultation. "The documentation of his affair, combined with the professional ethics violations, puts him in an extremely vulnerable position." I nodded, understanding the practical implications while feeling oddly detached from the legal process. The dissolution of 15 years together had been reduced to negotiations about assets and liabilities, percentages and timeframes. News from the architectural community continued to filter through professional contacts. Westfield had placed Daniel on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. The American Institute of Architects Ethics Committee had formally opened a case file. The City Library Board had called for an independent review of the project development process, focusing particularly on proper attribution for design elements. Vanessa had resigned from Westfield the morning after the ceremony. According to a mutual acquaintance, she had left the city entirely, returning to her hometown across the country. Whether Liam had accompanied her or they had separated remained unclear, and I found I didn't particularly need to know. Their story had intersected with mine at a critical juncture, but our paths had now diverged. The most unexpected development came a week after the ceremony. Clara Bennett called to inform me that the Public Space Innovation Award had been granted to a small, woman-led firm whose community center design had initially placed second to the library project. "Their work is extraordinary," Clara explained. "Truly collaborative, with meticulous documentation of every team member's contribution, the kind of ethical practice that deserves recognition." "I'm glad something positive emerged from all this," I replied, genuinely pleased that the award had found a worthy recipient. As the immediate aftermath began to settle, I found myself with time and space to examine the deeper implications of what had happened. Not just the betrayal itself, but my response to it, and what both revealed about the person I had been and the one I was becoming. For 15 years, I had built my identity largely around my marriage, not in a way that diminished me, but in the natural manner of someone who believed they were constructing a shared life with an equal partner. I had taken pride in our relationship, in the home we created, in the reputation we established as a couple others admired and respected. The discovery of Daniel's affair had shattered that identity, forcing me to confront questions I had never expected to face. Who was I outside the context of our marriage? What values would guide me when the foundations I had trusted proved false? What kind of life would I build from the wreckage of the one I had believed was secure? The public nature of our separation, a choice I had made deliberately, added another dimension to this reckoning. I had always been a relatively private person, content to support Daniel's more visible career while maintaining a quieter professional presence of my own. Now I had thrust myself into a spotlight of sorts, taking a stand that could not be ignored or diminished. That choice had changed how others perceived me. Friends who had known us as a couple seemed unsure how to relate to me individually, some drawing closer in support, others maintaining a cautious distance. Professional contacts who had previously seen me primarily as Daniel's wife now regarded me with a new awareness, sometimes uncomfortable, but undeniably different. Most significantly, the experience had transformed how I saw myself. The woman who had received those devastating photographs on her birthday had been blindsided, her sense of reality upended in an instant. The woman who had stood in that ballroom and spoken truth to power was someone else entirely, someone who refused to be defined by betrayal or confined by others' expectations. I began to recognize that this transformation hadn't occurred overnight. The seeds had always been there, in my independent career, in the strength that had carried me through previous challenges, in the clear-eyed practicality that had balanced Daniel's more ambitious nature. The crisis had simply accelerated a process of self-discovery that might otherwise have taken years to unfold. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the ceremony, I visited our home to collect additional belongings. Daniel wasn't there. We had arranged the visit through our lawyers to avoid direct contact. Walking through the spaces we had designed together felt like moving through a museum of a former life. Everything familiar, yet strangely distant, as if preserved behind glass. In the master bathroom, I caught sight of myself in the mirror Daniel and I had carefully selected during the renovation, an antique piece we had restored together over a weekend of shared labor and laughter. The woman who looked back at me seemed both known and unknown. The same features, the same eyes, but with a directness in her gaze that reflected hard-won wisdom. "Hello," I said softly to my reflection, acknowledging this evolved version of myself with something like respect. As I gathered the last of what I needed and prepared to leave, I paused in the entryway, my hand resting on the doorknob. This house had been the physical manifestation of what Daniel and I were building together, our tastes, our compromises, our shared vision of home. For years, I had believed it represented something solid and lasting. Now I understood that a home wasn't defined by its architecture or aesthetics, no matter how carefully chosen. A true home was built on honesty, respect, and genuine partnership, qualities that had been missing from my marriage far longer than I had been willing to acknowledge. I closed the door behind me without regret, recognizing that what I had lost wasn't nearly as valuable as what I had found. The courage to face truth, however painful. The strength to stand alone, however uncomfortable. And the freedom to begin again, however uncertain the path ahead might be. These realizations didn't erase the hurt or simplify the practical challenges of rebuilding a life, but they provided a foundation far more solid than the one that had collapsed beneath me. A foundation built not on someone else's promises, but on my own unshakable understanding of who I was and what I deserved. For the first time since my birthday, I felt something close to gratitude, not for the betrayal itself, but for the clarity it had ultimately brought. Some lessons can only be learned through loss. Some strength can only be discovered through vulnerability. Some truths can only be recognized when illusions are stripped away. As I drove away from the house that was no longer my home, I realized that what had initially felt like an ending was transforming into something else entirely. A beginning, unexpected, but finally, genuinely my own. 1 year after the night that changed everything, I stood in the gallery space of the Anderson Museum of Contemporary Art, surrounded by the culmination of months of work. The exhibition I had curated, Foundations, Truth and Structure, explored the relationship between architectural integrity and emotional honesty through a collection of works that challenged conventional perspectives. This professional triumph felt particularly meaningful given where my journey had begun. In the aftermath of the awards ceremony, I had received an unexpected call from the museum's director, who had been present that night. "We need someone with your eye for authenticity," she had said, "and your courage to stand by it." What had started as a consulting position had evolved into a role as the museum's director of special exhibitions, allowing me to build something truly my own. The divorce had been finalized 6 months earlier. Despite initial threats and posturing, Daniel had ultimately agreed to a settlement that acknowledged my contributions to our 15-year partnership. The house had been sold, the proceeds divided equitably. The legal end of our marriage had come with surprising simplicity, the paperwork unable to capture the complexity of what had been lost and what had been found. Daniel's professional trajectory had taken a sharper downward turn. The ethics investigation had resulted in a formal censure from the American Institute of Architects. Westfield had eventually transitioned him from administrative leave to a negotiated resignation. The last I heard, he had relocated to a smaller city, joining a mid-sized firm in a considerably reduced position. Vanessa had disappeared entirely from the architectural world. Through mutual connections, I learned she and Liam had divorced shortly after the ceremony. She had returned to graduate school in another state, pursuing a completely different career path. The confident woman who had sent those devastating birthday photographs had been replaced by someone seeking to reinvent herself far from the scene of her mistakes. I maintained occasional contact with Liam, who had channeled his own experience of betrayal into developing software tools for transparency in collaborative industries. We had met for coffee a few months ago, both of us marked by what we had endured but neither defined by it. "Do you ever regret the public nature of it all?" he had asked, stirring his espresso thoughtfully. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But secrets have power only when we agree to keep them. By bringing everything into the light, I reclaimed that power, for both of us." He had nodded, understanding the truth in those words. As I surveyed the gallery on opening night, I caught my reflection in one of the installation's mirrored surfaces. At 41, I looked different than I had a year ago. Not just the new hairstyle or wardrobe choices that had accompanied my fresh start, but something more fundamental in my expression and posture. The woman looking back at me stood straighter, her gaze more direct, her presence more fully her own. The path from devastation to rebuilding hadn't been linear or easy. There had been nights of doubt, days of grief, moments when the sheer effort of reconstruction had seemed overwhelming. But with each choice made independently, each challenge faced directly, I had assembled a life that reflected who I truly was, not as someone's wife or partner, but as myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.